tell I get so excited about this. I'm like,
that's awesome. That's gorgeous. That's beautiful. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Divulgence. Hope everyone is still enjoying their new year. Today, I welcome back a very special guest. She is a Galactic Walkin, as well as a very talented artist, musician, and she seems to have a very long resume of skills and attributes to her. So I'm very excited to have her back. My good friend, Aurora. Hi, Aurora. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to return. Thank you for such a beautiful, warm introduction. I appreciate you very much.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate you. I'm so happy for your return. So just to get the ball rolling, you said you've been working on some art today. So can you show us what you were working on today? And
yes, I would love to share.
Let's talk about your art for a little bit, because it's beautiful.
Asking. So you can see I have a couple of small examples on the wall behind me, and that larger piece is in progress, but it's wrapped up in plastic because it's still unsealed. So I don't want it to get like smudges or fingerprints on it. And this is what I've been working on today. And I'm just going to change the lighting a little bit so that you can hopefully see things a little bit better there. So this is just at the drawing stage. And what I'm doing, I'll hold it even a little bit closer to the camera. Can we get you to see?
There we go. Yeah, you can see more detail there. That is, oh my God. It's such a nice, for lack of a better term, such a nice skeleton of what I imagine it might become. It's, wow, that's wonderful. Wow, that's so cool. Do you start oh, there we go. Yeah, you can see more of the texture on the dots. Do you, I notice there seems to be, the first layer seems to be, is that a pen or pencil that you start your sketch with? Okay, and then you go from there.
What I'll usually do most of the time is start off with a piece of paper over, because I make my own substrates. So I make this wooden board that I'm painting on. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into that. And then I do a process of putting layers of gesso over it and making it perfectly smooth and sanding it and all of that. So when you have that much invested in just the white surface, you don't want to screw it up with like a lot of pencil marks, a lot of eraser marks. So what I do first is just cover it with a piece of paper. Then I work with pencils, rulers, compasses, templates, and all of that to create the basic, like you were saying, skeleton is a perfect word for it, to kind of work out my design, even though, so all of this work that I do is higher dimensional language. There's a language, it has like alphabet, word structure, paragraph structure, syntax, things that are allowed or not allowed. And then I, as an artist, work within those parameters, just like a poet of the physical language, it's language of harmonics, to figure out what I want to say within that language. So this particular piece is a commission that a person put into the ball into motion over a year ago, and they've already requested several other pieces. So I know what they've already got on their wall.
Congratulations.
And I wanted to do something that would work with what they already have, but that, and it's lovely, like these people that are connected to me in their artwork, they're like supporters, are like, free reign, like do your thing. You know, they won't ever say like, it has to look exactly like this. You know, they're very
That's a sign of your talent, Aurora, and your creativeness. I mean, that's a sign of many things, but yeah, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much for that. So I have free creative reign. And what I decided, because I'm an artist, I always have to challenge myself. I didn't want to just do exactly the same things I've already done. Like you can see similarities in this pattern as like the one that's on the wall. That one I did in 2008 for a math conference. I can't just keep going over retreading the same exact thing. So I was mentioning to you briefly before we started recording, I designed my own type of acrylic paint. And I developed that over, let's say, maybe 10 or 15 years of doing these paintings. And I'd love to tell you the company that I get my stuff from. It's Guerra, Guerra paint. So I basically, over 10 years, developed my own formula of paint. It's acrylic paint, to be able to make these different multi-layered effects and have it be almost, it almost looks quilted. It looks very dimensional. It's not just flat acrylic paint, and also super, super vibrant colors. And so I put these polymer thickeners in there, and it makes it almost look like a cabochon or like a glued on. It looks like an applique. It's got a very, very textured surface. So I have someone, they're a wonderful supporter, and they've already got a couple of pieces of mine, and they give me free rein. They're like, just make me a piece. And I know what they've already got, so I wanted to integrate and kind of make a story with what they've got. You can tell I get so excited about this. I'm like,
that's awesome.
I get separate pigments from the clear media, and I mix it up in my own formula like a mad scientist, quote unquote. And what I figured out is a way to use these plastic polymers and add them together to make these very raised dimensional dots, so that if you look at the surface of my painting, it's not just flat. There's lots of dots. It's almost like a bejeweled Fabergé egg, and all of that is very intentional. Like, I love for it to look like some kind of luxurious, like I say, bejeweled, faceted type of thing. So each one of these dots that you see here, if I kind of hold it up to the screen so you can see it, that's colored in with colored pencil, so that I have a map, so that I know what I'm doing, because it's easy to get confused in these paintings. So I do a detailed map that I'm working on the actual substrate now with colored pencil, and then what I'm going to do is fill in all the areas that are in white with white paint, and then I'll just have the dots, so I'll know, like, oh, I have to put a violet colored dot there, I have to put a green colored dot there, and then I mix up these little jars of paint, and then they only have a certain amount of like lifespan, like maybe you have a couple of hours before the whole entire jar of paint like turns solid, and these two.
Wow. Okay.
Brief window of opportunity. It's a two-part mixture. It's kind of like some two-part polymers. So I always do it with the windows open, because a lot of these two-part polymers will release a gas upon when you start to mix them together. Like it's like baking soda and salt in your quick breads. It makes it start to have a chemical reaction, and then you have to be prepared to work with it while it's got its chemical reaction going. So I learned all about like chemistry in order to be able to do this and make my artwork look the way I want it to look. So yeah, I mix up a jar of paint, then I've got a certain number of hours within which I can comfortably paint with it before it gets to be like too solid to work with. So then on those days, I'm just like, turn off the phone, stay completely focused, work with that color on that day, and go on. And so I'll do like, wherever there's a green dot, I'll make dots all around, and that will just be my job on that day. And I'll go all throughout the whole thing. So mostly in my paintings, I spend a lot of time in like measuring everything out, figuring out what would be called like the math formula or the language syntax of what I want it to look like, setting everything up very, very perfectly. And then, it will be like a very like a steady unfoldment. Like today I'm doing red. We're going to spend this many hours, just do red, 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 and kind of go through it in this very methodical way. Some paintings can take a year. So the one that you see that is wrapped up in plastic back there, I started that one before I moved to the San Diego area. So it's been in progress for a long time. So that's another thing. There's having like sometimes interruptions in my studio. Sometimes you pack everything up and you move, but then you get back to it. But uninterrupted, a painting like that of that size, it could be a whole year of between the time of actually like doing the drawing. I do the drawing very extensively. Then I have a technical pen, like, like a blueprint type of pen that has India ink in it, that I go over everything, all the pencil lines go over in ink so that it stays permanently. And then I go over everything with these, I have little tiny, I can get a brush for you and show you.
Sure, show us.
Yeah, as I have really little tiny brushes. I paint everything of that giant size 48-inch painting with little tiny brushes like this.
That's amazing.
How little. Yeah.
Amazing.
So very, very tiny detailed brushes where my nose is like this far away from the canvas. Like, I'm like bent down like this, doing my little tiny brush movements and everything. So yeah, very detail oriented, and the paintings take a long time to do. And that's also similar to the process of this is on fabric. But what I do is first I do a big giant painting, and then I'll take Photoshops, I'll take the images of it, Photoshop it, turn it into paintings turn it into fabric rather, by doing this kind of repeat, editing it together using Photoshop, and then have it made into fabric, and then have it fabricated into clothing. So yeah, there's a whole process behind that too. So the paintings are the start of the creativity, and then I use that as it ripples outward into more and more and more stuff. And all of this is the language of harmonics. All of this is all about beyond the language of verbalization and intellectual intellectuality and what we're used to speaking about concepts about. It's a different, like a higher dimensional language to be able to talk about these things. And so when I first came here as a walk-in, I spoke exclusively the higher dimensional language, and I would make these extensive drawings and show them to people. And most people were kind of like, like they like, they kind of think,
sure,
nice, but not necessarily really understanding what it was all about or what I was getting at or what I was trying to portray in, because there's a real information. I call them maps of time. So all of the things that I talk about when I talk about Flying Rainbow Lasagne, and you can see like I have paintings that I do of this, and I also do sculptures of this, and I also do animations to be able to show what it turns around and how it moves and all of that. All of these concepts, they are all higher dimensional concepts that, like, don't get me wrong, I love art that is just beautiful art for art's sake, but a lot of my stuff is diagrammatical in that it shows the way that time is structured. And I don't have examples on my wall, but in my classes, I use a lot of these examples, bringing together the sense of how your body is shaped. Like you have one face and two arms and two legs. You have a chakra system that goes, or an energy center system that kind of radiates outward from your body in all of these layers of being, and how that relates to what you see over here. These are maps of time and dimensionality, that you as an object, you are an object of time as well as an object of physicality, and that you nestle within this larger context or larger relevancy of both intelligence, because time itself is self-aware and intelligent, and it has, I would call them divine proportions. When I talk about divinity, though, I'm usually clear, like I'm not about an earthly church, and that's meant to be inclusive so that it's for anyone of any denomination to believe in this type of divine architecture that exists. It's for all of us, it's for consciousness, and it's for a dog or a tree or a molecule or a rock. Like it's for all of us, not just a particular belief system. That there's an organizational higher intelligence principle that we are within, and that is making our body self structured in a certain way, and that we also make choices about how we navigate time. And like if your body is shaped in the right way, you stay alive, you stay healthy. Like your nose is supposed to be on your face, it's not supposed to be on your elbow. If your nose is on your elbow, you are not healthy, you are not going to survive. When we learned a lot of these basic truisms just developing and gestating in the womb. Like the nose goes on the face, not on the elbow. All the versions of you where you were not formed correctly, they were not viable versions of you. So we figure out how to shape our body to stay alive. But then also once you have your body in the right shape, and your body contains sacred geometry, like these proportions of this bone to this bone, or this tooth to this tooth, or the way that your cells are structured, it's all this divine harmonic proportion. But then you figure out how to navigate time. That navigating time and the decisions that you make throughout your day are also part of your individuality nesting in a complementary way, being within that divine architecture. That there's like, just like your nose is supposed to be on your face, not on your elbow, there are certain things that you're supposed to do throughout the day, or experience, or ways of being, timelines or time pathways, where it's like, if you are on these timelines, you will be healthy and alive. But then if you don't, if you play the wrong notes, if you don't do those things that you're supposed to be doing, that are kind of like from the great conductor, right? Here's my pen. The great conductor is like, tap, tap, tap. Now you play this and you play this, and then go into the transition. The violins will then play and you rest over here. If you don't listen to those musical cues, it's not like you're a bad person or you're wrong, you're evil. You're just not taking part in the music that is the symphony of life. And then you die, because you're just not with it. You're not in the groove.
I just thought I would give you an opportunity for the listeners who maybe didn't hear our first episode, maybe give you a few minutes to speak on you being a walk-in and the Flying Rainbow Lasagne, just because I know you will mention it a lot. So
I think that's a great idea. Really good, because it's kind of like getting in touch with the TV show and you're like already on episode 2 or 3. Yeah. You're like, wait, I think something's going on, but I don't exactly know who the characters, what's even happening. So here's the recap of where we were talking about before. Yeah, so I describe myself as a galactic walk-in, and I even got that type of self-description or name from a book that is called ET 101, the Handbook, that I didn't even, like when I first came here, into human form was 2001. And I basically came in during a metabolic death experience, or what people would call an NDE, a near-death experience of this body, where the person who lived in this body for the first 27 years had a really profound brain damage experience, and the body itself would have died with like cellular decomposition, with basically a car with no driver. No one's at the driving wheel, no one's holding the steering wheel. And I, Aurora, come from a place that is actually outside of time and dimensionality. Right now, I'm in a body, I'm in a house, I have earthly real estate. I live here inside of time and dimensionality. But mostly where I come from is a consciousness collective, because when I had to learn how to describe this to people too, because when I first came here, I would say, like, I'm an extraterrestrial or I'm an otherworldly presence. And people are used to that movie, E.T., they're like, E.T. phone home, show me in the sky, where are you from? And I'm not from a particular place. Like, I can't point to it and say, I'm from that star system there, or here's my street address, or I'm from that planet, because I'm from a collective of consciousnesses, and we travel from place to place, kind of like a neural impulse. If you could imagine that the stars are like a very giant brain or a giant neurology, and each star is like a neuron, my collective is like a thought structure that bounces from star system to star system, and there's all sorts of light portals through which we go. So it's not a clank metal spaceship, and it's not even flying across space and time in the way that you would consider flying from point A to point B. So even in first coming here, there were so many challenges that were linguistic challenges because of the linearity of, like, this is the time verbal language here is representative of a linear understanding of time, like first, second, third, before, during, after, linear. That's not the type of way to speak about things that's like all at once, which is where I come from, a world where time is experienced all at once. You have a different, completely different, more like my artwork, a harmonic structure that is purely telepathic, of being able to just share concepts and display what is happening in any particular time state. So the first part was coming into a world that has mainly linear verbal descriptions of what time is. And then the second challenge was having a neurologically damaged body, where I had to do a lot of rewiring, and I didn't have the word at the time, but it's called neuroplasticity, where different parts of your brain compensate for the parts that were damaged. So you have to kind of like learn, like, okay, if the language centers over here don't work, like, we'll use language centers over here. You kind of learn different ways. So yeah, I had to learn all of these different ways of repatterning with my brain, which with what became my brain, in order to even make things work. So that was definitely a steep learning curve. And then the other thing is people's basic misconceptions of what it is to be an extraterrestrial or an extra dimensional type of presence. They think like you come from a planet, you live on the surface of a planet, that's what life is like. And I'm like, no, I'm a waveform. I'm a waveform presence, in the same way that like a song is a waveform, and you can play that song on a piano or on a violin or sing it with your voice. The song is the abstraction of who and what you are, but it can go through the medium of all of these different types of instruments. Okay. And even the idea of being a collective, like people mainly here are individuals. So the idea of saying, where do you come from? Come from a collective. And then a lot of people would think that I come from the Borg, which is like from Star Trek, which I didn't even know about. So then I had to educate myself. I had to look into what that is to get the cultural shorthand. And then once I learned what that is, I'm like, no. I'm not a cyborg. We're not here to overrun the world and take over everything. Because if you don't know Star Trek, that's what it is. Like the Borg is here to take over. Resistance is futile. So I had to face these cultural preconceptions of even what a visitor from another world, another culture, an extraterrestrial or supernatural visitor would be. Steep uphill climb to be able to find acceptance. So eventually, after several years of being here, a friend of mine, it was actually a new person in my life, but they became a good friend, told them about my story, and I didn't have the words for it. And they were like, you sound like a walk-in. And I didn't know what that word meant. And they gave me a book that I said, it's called ET 101, the handbook. It's like for the ground crew. And you can still find it. I just looked for it to send it to another new friend. And it's in PDF, but you can also find it on Amazon or like in bookstores. Yeah, so you can check it out, ET 101, the handbook. And I felt like, oh, like finally, I've been here on my mission for several years and I'm finally getting the handbook. And I read through there and it gives some pretty good descriptions of what is a walk-in, what is a crawl-in. Like a crawl-in is a person where there might have been a cessation of the heartbeat of a baby while it's gestating in the womb. And the original being that is making that human container isn't there anymore, and something else comes into that container and then takes on the responsibilities of that life. So a big distinction that I make with myself and with this experience is like, all of this is done in love. All of this is consensual. You would say it's according to like a soul contract. None of it is for sightseeing. It's not like, oh, I think it would be cool to be a woman and have long hair and see what it feels like to walk around and be this person. None of it is for these silly reasons or capricious reasons or being on a pleasure cruise. That it's because of soul contract, and it's really because you have a mission, something to accomplish. It's consensual in that there's an agreement, like what the person whose life you're taking over, what they went through, and then what you are taking up in terms of coming in and doing it. And then also there's different flavors of walk-ins, which is why I say I'm a galactic flavored walk-in, because there are some people where it's like a human soul leaves a human body and then a human soul comes and occupies that body. It's a different driver of the car. But I not only came in as a new driver of the car, I am from a way super different type of place and type of different life and level of consciousness and approach to life than humanity. And so it's been a challenge for me to learn, like, what is it to be human? What is it to have a biological body? What are human cultures? What are human values? How do people here treat one another? How do you talk with people and integrate and get your message across? All of that was also a big, huge challenge. And I thought in coming here, when I made the spontaneous decision, basically all of this is backstory to be able to describe the origins of this shape that I call the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. Because like I said, my collective doesn't fly on a metal spaceship, and it's not even necessarily flying from point A to point B, but we have consciousness vehicles, like light body vehicles that we use to get where we need to go. And in order to get into this body here, I had to create a dimensional doorway, or a portal, which is an oscillation, which is what this shape is. So this is a flat, this is a sculptural representation, and that's not moving, of something that you can imagine. It's oscillating, it's jumping very, very fast, and also spinning around and whirling very, very fast. And that it is a new genetic structure. So what I did was created these little whirlwinds, very, very fast movements inside of the genetic structure of this cellular physicality body, so that I, as this waveform abstract presence from outside of time and dimensionality, could jump on in and experience this individual's body. And all of this was done for the purposes, cosmic purposes, on a mission of rectification and healing. Because the whole reason of why she was dying, why she was attacked, all of those things were like very unfair, very against cosmic law in every way, like an insult to my sense of righteousness and propriety. That part of the value system of the people or person, the collective where I come from, is this sense of upholding cosmic law and justice, the sense of these are the way things are supposed to be, and this is the divine, pristine world of the way that, like, the original musical score of the composer, this is the music that the composer wrote. Then I start to hear, like, wait, that's a wrong note over there, that's a wrong note over there, those are many wrong notes. And then in the death of this person, this woman who was, like, was not slated to die, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it was a big wrong note. And I just said, that is just not acceptable. And that I need to do something in the moment to rectify and heal and fix the great mistake that I see going on in the symphony of life that as being played. And so what I did was I spontaneously created this portal just on the moment, decided to do it. I hadn't preconceived it, and came into this body, and the body was age 27. So this was several decades ago at this point. And then, like I said, had the steep learning curve of what it's actually like to be here and learning how to communicate with humanity. And all of this, I, in a very naive way coming in, thought that my assignment would just be a couple of years. I thought that I would be here until roughly 2003. I thought that all I needed to do was make some Flying Rainbow Lasagna sculptures, make some drawings, bring that message in that way to humanity. And then I used to stand on a street corner and just be kind of like, here's this, make this sculpture and just kind of offer it to people. And you could imagine you as enculturated humans being like, yeah, like if you met some unusual person standing on a street corner holding a rainbow sculpture, you'd be like, oh, like, okay, like that's weird. And then go on with your day. It wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, you've brought cosmic truth into our realm. Now our entire society is changed and restructured. Everything shifts in that direction. And now you have a completely recalibrated human society. No, because that did not happen. But I, in my naivete, thought that was all that it would take. So I'd be like, okay, like I thought I would be here for a couple of years. I'm trying this approach. This approach did not work. So my journey over the past several decades, since 2001, has been about continually refining my communication approach to humanity. Like you can't just stand on a street corner holding a sculpture. You can make a lot of artwork. Then my next approach was I'm just going to make a lot of artwork, tons and tons of detailed drawings and paintings and things like that. And again, I would share it with people, but people would think like that is a pretty picture, which art for art's sake, beautiful, but that was just not getting across the profundity of my message. And then at a certain point, which was around 2012 or 2013, I was like, I am going to have to make a class. Like I created myself like I am Professor Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and I'm going to make a class because that's how people learn about things in this place. And I actually started to take the information and put it in a linear fashion. Like first you're going to learn this, and then you're going to learn this, break it up into building blocks and kind of present it in a scholarly way, because that is how people learn at school. Like how did you learn language when you went to school? First you learned your ABCs, and then after a couple of years of practicing that and mastering that and singing the alphabet song, do, 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 X, Y, Z, now I know my alphabet. And so then after you learned that, then you learned how to put the letters together into words. And then you learned how to spell out words and make a sentence. Then you learned that sentences fit together into paragraphs. And then there was the big day when you actually read a book with many paragraphs and chapters. And that was like, hooray, like now you have reading comprehension. So all of this painting that I do, my class that I do, my music that I do is about helping humanity have quote unquote reading comprehension about the structure of time. And just like when you become literate in this world, we go through a lot of challenges to be able to learn your ABCs and read everything. When it clicks inside of your mind and you're literate, then you're like, wow, now all of a sudden you are empowered. You're empowered to read what's on the label of something at a grocery store. You know what's inside of it. You pick up a can, you know what's inside of the can because you can read it. How about books? You pick up a book and you read it. The book contains potentiality of information. All of a sudden, with you having your decoder ring of your mind functional, you can now understand the stuff that is written about in books. You become the equal to other people who are also literate. It changes and empowers you on your journey. It's a huge thing. So being literate in time means that humans can now read what's on the container of the can before you actually have the experience. You can be like, can of beans, do I want to buy that? Can of tomato sauce, something totally different in your life. In the time structure of your life, you can look down a timeline. If you can read and you're literate, be like, do I want to buy that can of beans? Do I want to have that series of experiences? Or do I want to buy a can of tomato sauce, which brings me over in this direction, a totally different level of experience? And it makes you, the embodied human, equal to all of the other, we call them races, for lack of a better word, races, species, or levels of organism that are time literate, that see with their insight, their eye of time, that are able to perceive the multiplex of possibilities and probabilities, and that literally navigate reality based upon that inner sense of seeing, which is literacy, as opposed to being illiterate or being blind or insensate when you're just like a Roomba robot. Like you bump off of things, you kind of reverse, and then you bump in the next direction, and you reverse, and you bump in the next direction, and how disheartening that is to make so many mistakes and fall off the cliff and have to be reincarnated and then come back again. All of those things are a very different level of experience than when you are literate and you can read the musical score of time, and we are in the key of G. We are playing at 4/4 time, and then you're going to be expected to play this note coming up 5, 6, 7, 8, play your note, and then you're ready for it, and you become a musician who's ready to play with the rest of the band in the symphony of life.
before we get back to your art, just a few little questions about being a Galactic Walkin.
Yeah.
One thing that came to mind when you mentioned when you did take form, when you had to learn how people, behave and how they treat themselves and how they treat each other and how they react to different things. I think of the difficulties, but also the difficulties when I'm sure you started to realize that all those rules and sets of behaviors and norms and everything change when you step into a different, possibly neighborhood, city, state, country, continent, right? So it's just an interesting thought that came to my mind when you were speaking to that. So I mean, if you have anything to comment on that comment.
I do. And thank you so much for also respecting my privacy and how much I would like to share about my personal journey.
Aurora, absolutely.
So when I first came into this body, I was in upstate New York, very close to Woodstock, New York. That's like well known by everyone from the rock and roll history. And I literally acculturated as to what is human society and what is quote unquote normal for human society in Woodstock, New York, which is like not a normal or representative or whatever place of what all humans do things about. Like it's its own very small, unique little rock and roll niche in upstate New York. So I lived there for many years, kind of taking things as a matter of course, like this is the way they do it around here, like in the world. And then it wasn't until I traveled to, like I said, I did this painting for a math art conference. So I started to bring my artwork to some of these scholarly academic conferences to share them. So it meant I went out of my bubble. I went out of Woodstock, New York, and I started to meet people that were international and also travel to different places. And as I did, like my eyes completely, you can imagine, opened up. People do things differently than they do things in Woodstock. They dress differently. They have different approaches. They have different value systems. They have different ways of interacting with and communicating with one another. And my eyes were totally opened. My vistas were expanded. All of a sudden was like, wow, Woodstock is a very small town. I still have so much love for it. So don't ever misinterpret this, but it's kind of like when you realize like you're from a small town and it's a big world out there. And after that, I couldn't wait to experience more of what humanity is and how people do things differently in other places.
Sure. I'm not 100% sure the size on Woodstock. It might be smaller than Thunder Bay, but I totally understand. I'm from Thunder Bay and I finally made the move to Toronto not too far back. And not that it's the same situation that you were in, but I do understand what you mean. Just moving from the small city to the big city. And it's a bit of a large change in many aspects. So sure.
In Woodstock, like there are limited numbers of housing available. There's limited numbers of job opportunities available. It's a very small community. Almost everybody knows everybody. So in so many ways, I had to learn that there's other types of community, other ways of social structuring, other ways of approaching housing, and every aspect of what human culture is. So I don't reject Woodstock, but I just say those are the first lessons that I learned of being a human. And Woodstock has a very magical mountain that is right, like here's the little town of Woodstock, then here's the mountains called Overlook Mountain. And I call it like mini Mount Shasta. If you know Mount Shasta in California, Mount Shasta is an enormous portal, and it's a portal to inner earth or Agartha or Shangri-La, Shambhala. People have all these wonderful stories of portaling around. It's a very magical place to visit. And I say visit there if you're called to visit there. I went to Mount Overlook, like it's a portal that's similar, but just a much smaller magnitude. So it's a smaller version of the type of energy that Mount Shasta is. So yeah, Woodstock is a very special, magical community. And that's why I feel like I portaled in there for a reason, and then kind of got my feet underneath me and learned what it was to be even
Okay.
in a body and in a community there. But then as I became more adept at being a human, then I was like, wow, I can't wait to expand. And even my journey has been about expansion throughout. Like I ended up moving to California, I ended up moving to slightly larger places, and now I live in San Diego, which is like the big city, and I drive on multi-lane highways and there's lots and lots of people everywhere. So yeah, I've definitely leveled up in my whatever human community approach and interactivity with levels of people.
That's great. Congratulations again on the move. I think the first time we spoke, you had just moving in actually. So how is San Diego treating you?
Very well.
Good.
I'm very solar oriented. So one of the reasons why I chose San Diego is because it's very sunny, throughout most of the year. It's different than Woodstock. In Woodstock, so like I'm a light eater and I come from a light collective. And it was really challenging. When I first came here, I didn't even know about food. So that was one of the learning curves, that I tried to just eat nothing but pure sunlight, and I didn't even
Right.
understand like you have to eat food from the grocery store. So that was a big part of my learning curve. But then in Woodstock, it's normal, kind of like around November, everybody goes into hibernation, and you don't come out of hibernation until maybe like March. That people kind of, their energy levels go lower and slower, their creativity lower and slower. They don't do as much socializing. You hibernate, you go inside. It's mostly cold and frozen outside. There's not that much activity. And also, like, everybody gets really, really pale. You don't get to eat a lot of sunlight. It's cold and overcast and dreary, and you have to be bundled up in many layers against all of this winter. You don't get a lot of sun. And that was always really, really challenging thing for me, because I literally eat light. So as I started to learn more about what it's like in other places, I was like, well, wait a minute. There's even places where like it's sunny in the winter time, and you can go there and you can eat sunlight even if it's December or January. And then I started to really choose like, okay, I have to consciously change my life. So that's why I live in San Diego. I wanted to be someplace where my art and music would be appreciated, where there's lots of good sharing on that level, and good appreciators of what I have to offer, and also where there's an abundant supply of light food throughout the year, so that I can
Yeah.
do my sun gazing, so that I can get that connection to the sun and the stars. So yeah, I'm very, very happy that I'm here. And life is always about a learning curve. So I'm always learning about like how to navigate, and what are the customs of the time and place, and what are the best ways to do things. And I'm always fine tuning my life. But I also am starting to recognize that that's not just me, that is everyone. Because I also, as a visitor outsider, would often share with people kind of like an insecurity, where I may be kind of like, hey guys, like I don't really know what I'm doing around here. I kind of don't know what's the right thing to do, or what's the wrong thing to do, or the right thing to say. And a lot of humans would respond and they would say, Aurora, we don't either. Like, we don't know what is the right thing to do either, or we make mistakes socially, or we don't know exactly how everything is structured. And then I start to relax and be a little bit, you can see my shoulders and back, like, oh, I can just relax. Nobody knows what the F they're doing around here.
Oh,
We
we
are
do
all
not.
just, yeah, improvising and doing the best we can. And then I
Exactly.
became a lot less concerned. Like, one just like silly example, this wasn't even that many years ago, but I was at Trader Joe's and I had gotten the whole bean coffee, and I was trying to put it in the coffee grinder to make it work. And I thought that I had pressed the wrong button. I thought I had destroyed their machine, and I had to talk to someone and be like, I think I destroyed your machine. I think I did it all wrong. I did it, whatever. And she came over and she kind of put her hand on my shoulder. She's like, no, you just need to press this button. It's fine. And she looked at me and she was also like, you're okay. Don't be worried. You're okay. Life is okay. Like, I thank you. I
Wonderful.
needed that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful lesson. Sometimes it can, whatever your worries, it can be as simple as the push of a button. So take a step back and take a breather.
Completely. Yes, it was just a safety catch or some safety mechanism. But I'm like, I'm gonna have to pay for the machine. I broke the whole entire thing. I broke the
Yeah.
universe. I did
Yeah.
not break the universe.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's good. And
Yeah.
that's, I didn't think of that. With that's nice that San Diego's got all that sun for you. For our listeners, as she said, she's literally a light eater. So yeah, for you to have that extra light, I'm sure, for your lifestyle and whatnot, that's a very positive little upgrade. So good for you. That's
Yes.
cool. And
And I will tell people also that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to
no.
say that when people, like, let's say you live someplace that is a cold, frozen place, or even I have a friend, he's a lovely person and he's been in my classes for many years, and he lives in Sweden, very close to the Arctic Circle. So there are some times of the year when he has minimal sunlight. And first of all, I do beam telepathic care packages. Like, I send sunlight care packages to people that live in cold, dark places. There are ways of, let's say, reaching out with your mind across time and space that make it so that you can access the sunlight and get that warmth, even if it's not physically warm sunshine like you can see coming in through my window, falling upon my skin. So physically, my friend in Sweden doesn't have the light coming in his window, but with his mind or with the tendril of attention, you can reach out to the sun directly. You can reach out to warmer climates. You can kind of like the way that a mycelium or a plant's roots, like they reach out and get what they need. So that is one way of understanding it. Like, you don't have to be depressed or sad if you live someplace where it's cold and be like, that's it, everybody moved to San Diego. There are solutions beyond physically moving that have to do with using your psychic power to bend time and space so that you can access the sun, even if it's non-local, is what I'm trying to say. Real sunlight and real consciousness is non-local to time and space. So you can get it, but it just takes a little bit of expertise to be able to tune into those broadcasts.
To be able to reach out and grab it. Okay, interesting.
Well said.
Is this your first time as a physical being, as a physical form?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I actually, as Aurora, that has become a coherent light being, and I'm in this collective state, that level of my consciousness, I remember being embodied in a time that is known in this time and place as an ancient or mythological time called Atlantis. And that time I see as a concurrent time. Again, our linear language is inadequate to be able to really talk about this accurately, but I see where we are presently is like this hand, and Atlantis is like this hand, and it's not like one hand came first than the other. I see them as overlapping concurrent experiences. So I remember, or occupy at the same time, what it was like to be in a physicality body when we all were light eaters before even death was invented. And that culture, that antediluvian or pre-flood culture, in this time and place, in terms of linear language, is remembered as the time of the immortals, a time when humans walked the earth like gods. You never grew old, never got diseases, you lived for thousands of years until at a certain point you inevitably ascended. That back then, or at that time, in that level of reality, maybe is the best way to say it, in that level of reality, ascension is inevitable. Nobody dies, and you basically go on this very long lifelong journey or pilgrimage where you meet all these people, have all these journeys and adventures, and then at a certain point it all converges back in this amazing crescendo of experience where you kapow, like you become pure light again. And then that's not the end of your journey, but then that's just the beginning of the next chapter, the next stage of you being what we would describe as an ascended master, or a coherent light being, or a pure light being without embodied physicality. So I remember what it was like in my earthly experience or my embodied experience to live that life where no disease, no death, no grief, no loss, no separation. You don't have to eat other organisms. That means definitely like no chicken farms, no egg farms, not even no spinach farms. Everything was treated very differently. Our lives were very calibrated differently, and our motivations were, and value system, and as a culture, everything was very different. And then so I went through my stages of leveling up and became this light collective that's at the level of the stars. And then I went from that level, which is like PhD grad student, back here into this body. And at this point, bodies have changed. And now the human earthly experience is about individual separation, mortality. That means you have the capacity to grow old chronologically, become diseased, and die, as opposed to everybody inevitably ascending and achieving that moment of eternal life that many people die. And so a lot of what we experience here now is about the life lessons of grief and loss. And I was thinking about that. I have beautiful friends on the other side, or in heaven, or in the afterlife, however you would like to use those words. And they help me a lot from the other side.
when they passed on or when they died, when they crossed over and left this world, I cried a lot. I was very sad for it. I felt a huge amount of loss. And that's a different level of like, it's like, oh, kapow, like you feel it on a deep level that is undeniable, that it's part of the soul refinery of the experiences of being here, the suffering, the grief, the loss, even the loss of something like I had a beautiful cat and she died, and that like we were together, but then we were apart. She was there, but then she was not there anymore. That sense of, all of that, it becomes an emotional life lesson that is very profound, that leads up to your divine perfection, but the suffering can be so difficult to go through it. And people here, like, that is defined as the human condition. Like, parents will pass on and die, sometimes brothers or sisters or siblings or husbands or wives or life partners, and definitely beloved pets, because their lifespans are shorter than ours. We deal with so much loss and grief. But then on the other hand, I feel so much presence and connection from these beings who have passed on, that I would say that they're like angelic helpers from the other side. I got friends in high places, however you would like to say it, that they are absolutely guides, encouragers on my path. So my experience here in this mortal realm is tinged with so much sadness, but then there's also so much triumph and so much love and beauty that comes out of it. There's poignancy, like a kind of like, it makes you choke up and like cry a little bit, like like your throat becomes a little bit blocked up, like it's profound emotion. It's different than what I'm used to on that other level.
Okay, interesting. We don't necessarily learn about the human condition unless it's us growing up and it sort of being instilled in us in whatever shape or form that is. So how was that for you? At whatever point you heard of this human condition and it's like, oh, it's actually sort of a thing that's studied and written down, so to speak, if to kind of put it in simple terms.
Yeah, I learned all of these lessons that most humans learn when they're in early childhood, but in chronological adulthood. So I came into a body at age 20, the body was age 27, and I spent that or the first couple of years of my chronological adulthood life here, learning about all of these lessons of like mortality, grief, loss, but also what it is to live in community. Like what is, like, I didn't know about limited resources, because the place where I come from, both Atlantis, that level of reality, and the level of a pure light collective, there's an infinite amount of resources and there's no need for competition, and there's an infinite amount of sharing of those resources. So I had to learn about competition, limitations. I did not initially understand, like, wait, there's a large food room where the food is stored, and if you want the food, you must access it with magical pieces of paper. Like, I did not know or understand that's grocery stores. I didn't understand anything about that. And then I had to learn, because to me, everything was an abstraction. Like, yes, like the apples are just here, or even hot water comes out of a hole in the wall. Like that. I didn't know about a hot water heater. I did not know about, oh, you got to call a plumber. I didn't know it costs money. I didn't know you have electrical bills to make the water hot. I had to learn about all of those causality structures to make the resources that then are the things that support us here in this time place. So once I started to learn about that over the first couple of years, then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I understand there's only so many apples, that are on only so many trees, and they have to drive them here on trucks, and the trucks have the gas. And this is why this all costs money. And this is why this is limited. And this is why you can't just go in there and get as many apples as you want. That is a lesson that most children learn, like maybe around kindergarten, like 5 or 6 years old, definitely under age 10. So I was learning all of those lessons, which again, I came in a sacred infantile form, just like all of you come in a sacred, you're not unintelligent, but you are ignorant. I'm trying to say a sacred ignorance of simply not knowing about the way that things are structured. And then once you start to learn, like, oh, that's the way that things are structured, the light is dawning on me. All of these things are resources. There's a limited amount of it. And then I really learned, like, you have to make a contribution so that you are not burdensome to other people that are sharing their apples or the hot water that comes out of the hole in the wall or any of the resources that are here and that are available. And that is also what the motivation that most young people learn also. So I began to become motivated to learn, like, how do you earn money? How do you commodify your time? How do you participate in what is known as human economy and socialization? All all of these things. I went on a huge journey, never losing my value system, like never losing sight of this ideal of the way that we should be acting, but also kind of playing along, quote unquote, doing the dance moves of the way that people do it around here. At first, the first couple of years, I was like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I did things that people do here, including diet and nutrition habits and, you know, personal habits. So like I drank a lot of caffeinated coffee and I smoked tobacco cigarettes and I worked really stressful long hours because that was like, this is the way that people do this around here. And then I started to learn like, these are not good things to do for your body. The body says this is not allowed, especially like the tobacco cigarettes and the, you know, other things that are like extraneous. That I learned all of these things. It's like learning that you have to eat food. I did what other people did, and I learned like that does not feel good on your body. But then I also learned like, but wait, I want to stop doing this, but I have an addiction. I learned what it was to feel addicted to a substance. You know it's not it's bad for you. You know it's not good. You know it's not helping you, and it costs money. And even as you try to change and go in a positive direction, you keep going back to old habits. So I learned all of these lessons. It's like solidarity, because it is too simple for me. It would be too, let's say, facile for me to be in a level of purity, like living on a cloud, quote unquote. I'm floating on a cloud. Everything is great. I'm doing the backstroke, you know, I'm like floating along in the ether. And it would be so easy for me to be like, oh yeah, guys, like you just do this, like give these pronouncements. Very, very different, because everyone would be like, well, that's easy for you to say, Aurora, like you live on a cloud and you don't have to pay for hot water or figure out all these things about having a body and food and economy and all this stuff. So I'm actually here as a first person experiencer. I learned all of these things, all of the challenges of what it is to be in community. I'm in solidarity with everyone. And then I also feel like I've developed really good, not just coping mechanisms, but effective approaches to being healthy and fortifying yourself in this time and place. And so now, like I said, I've been here for about 20 years as Aurora, as this Galactic Walkin presence. Now I give counsel to other people, that I do one-on-one sessions, and I give them the wisdom that I've accumulated of like, here is how you take care of a body. But even though many people know that already, but like, I should say better, here's how you have good life habits. Here is how you bring your body and your life and your trajectory in a positive direction, even in terms of manifesting, like using your ability to envision reality to create the life that you wish to experience. A lot of the people that I work with identify as star seeds, or visitors from another place, or people who are from a fairy realm where things are more genteel and nicer and not quite as barbaric or brutal. And I really help people to kind of understand, like, how do you first of all celebrate having a physical form? And you celebrate like, yep, you're in a body, you have to eat physical food, you have to use toilet paper, you have to do all these different hygiene things, you got to brush your teeth, you got to do all these different things to keep your body healthy, and not be like, oh, like I have to take care of my body. Like, no, hooray, I'm taking care of my body. And then the body's sacred wisdom, dealing with, like I said, food and good food choices. And then a big thing is also integrating with human economy, because many people think like in order to earn money, that it's something negative, because you have to somehow diminish yourself of doing what you do not wish to do, or living in a way that is untruthful to yourself, and that's how you get the money. And there's certainly a multiple opportunities to do that and to diminish yourself and get money for it. But the real artistry is finding ways to honorably and nobly integrate with human society, earn the money by doing your mission while you're here. Like, you have gifts and talents to share, you do those things, you don't compromise yourself, you share who you are with the world, and then you get the money as a result of that. And so a lot of it, I encourage people about carving their own niche, or making their own reality structure. That is something like, if you're a unique person, or you come from another world, or you come from another star system, or however you describe it, if you come from inner earth, or you're an elemental, that you might have a very different viewpoint and a different way of being than just, yeah, you know, you go out and get a job and work in a cubicle and, you know, whatever, type things up on a computer every day and send your emails. That you might have a different approach, and that it's something to be honored and celebrated. And even in the 20 years that I've been here, I've noticed humanity changing and leveling up, that it really is true. People recognize not everybody is built or wired the same way. Like people have different types of neurological perception equipment. People experience life differently. People need different hours, different flexibility, different approaches. So humans have leveled up in what they accept in terms of commodification of time, like what you do for your job, your job. And I'm big about that, like your job can be your joy, and that you find a way to move beyond just the mere commodification of time, which is where you're like, I'll sell 1 hour of my time for, $10 or $20. It's different than that, because what you really want to be doing is aligning your talents and gifts and skills with your perfectly created divine timeline, so that you're in time with the cosmic music, doing what the great conductor says. The great conductor says, now it is time for you to do this, and now it is time for you to do this, and you listen. And then of course you receive your magical pieces of paper so that you can get into the food room, the grocery store, and buy your apples and pay for the hot water that comes out of the hole in the wall, and do all of those things. And then life becomes this kind of magical activity where you're aligning with the right timelines and the right contextual prompts. There's like a conductor or a prompt that says, like, you need to be here doing this. And when you listen, then you get rewarded and your life flows, and hopefully your quality of your existence is comfortable. And that, yeah, so I try to encourage everyone towards these fulfillment of your mission. And fulfillment of your mission sometimes is goal oriented, like I am here to like make this sculpture, I am here to make this song. But sometimes it is also about a state of beingness, that your mission sometimes is about who you are, what you are as a person, your state of being, and that is also a gift to share with the world, and that you are able to find a way to be that version of self and be healthily integrated with the rest of the world, which I think is it's a non-linear way of looking at your life, as opposed to maybe your mom and dad or your grandparents' generation said, look, kid, like life's tough out there. It's a jungle out there, kid. You're going to have to get an education, and you're going to have to get a job, and you're going to earn some money, and like get out there and, find a way to live. And that's like that tough, brutal, those are lessons that are appropriate for that time and space, old paradigm. We are moving out of old paradigm. And so, like I said, in the past several decades, humanity has leveled up. They not only recognize that people are different and have different neurological wiring and different requirements. So that means like now some people can work remotely. Like not everybody can drive, not everybody has to drive, not everybody has to go to a physical office in order to do some valued work every day. So people who are differently abled or who, choose not to live that life can still make contributions. But also we're moving into what people are calling new earth, or a new paradigm, a new context, where it's not just about commodification and like so my one hour is worth $10, or I dig a ditch for you and it's worth this many dollars. That it's a different approach, that all of us are leveling up in appreciating what the gift of what it is to be alive, the gift of what it is to be here. Like it's not just about the industrialized world. Industrial meaning like what happened in the late 1800s. You're with me all the way, and I can tell by your facial expression. Because we moved out of an agrarian society where people were largely in tune with natural cycles. Because if you're living on a farm and growing plants to stay alive, you have to be like, yep, it's the harvest season. Like that's why school is not in session over the summertime, because everybody had to be home on the farm helping to harvest the wheat or the barley or whatever you were growing for your family to stay alive. So we still have these vestigial traces. But then maybe like 200 years ago, everybody invented artificial light, everybody invented factories, and then you became a cog in the larger factory world where you are now outside of the natural rhythms of time and nature and expected to sell your hours per dollars in order to survive in the world. And we're moving out of that. That's a suit of clothing that was appropriate for 200 years ago. And now we're creating a modern example of what we're supposed to do, which is in tune with natural life cycles, in tune with nature and the natural world and natural seasons and time cycles, and also in tune with natural human neurology and biology. That is different than being a factory worker or working like Pavlovian dog, like ding, now it's time to do this. ding, now the bell rings and it's time for you to do this. Ding, now you get a lunch break and you salivate because it is time for you, like, now it is my lunch break and now I'm allowed to go and eat. And ding, now you're allowed to go and use the bathroom. And ding, now you are back to work at this state. We're creating, and it is necessary to create a fine-tuned type of structure of what it is to be alive now that is much more accommodating, much better quality of life, and is bringing us more towards that divine excellence of what our lives when we're embodied should actually be like.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more. And it seems to be a lot more changes happening in that respect these days. So hopefully for the better. We'll see what happens, but I mean, it seems to be an ever changing thing. It would be nice that they be positive changes, right? Like, of course, that's what you want, and that's what you could ask for. So,
yes.
One other thing that I just wanted to ask before we get back to speaking about your gorgeous art. I'm not sure how to ask this. Have you been in a form, or is your previous or original form consist of what we refer to as a third eye? And what is your thoughts on human form? And I mean, I'm not an expert on the third eye and everything, and the notion that it calcifies, I believe is the term. So any comments or anything that you want to speak to on that?
Thank you. That's a beautiful, like, rich topic that I can say so many things on. In the human body that we are in right now, there is an actual neurological structure inside of your brain mind that's kind of in between your two hemispheres, but also at the top of your spine. That is your pineal gland, and that has everything to do with the force field that is emitted around your head that would be known as your third eye or your eye of time. I associate it with Christ consciousness, even though I will affirm over and over, it's for anyone of any culture, of any denomination, not just for people who call themselves or define themselves as a Christian. And also, that is said with the greatest of respect for those who define themselves as a Christian or who follow the teachings of a great teacher who is from 2,000 years ago, who was a person with a face and arms and legs. But the Christ consciousness is an abstraction and like a pure energy knowing that is also a master teacher that resides within us. So where I come from when I am Aurora, my collective, I am on a consciousness network that would be affiliated or known or defined as Christ consciousness. Let me get a little crystal here. Hold on a second.
Wonderful, yeah.
If I show you this is a crystal, and it has a crystalline structure. It has different facets, and it both bends and refracts and reflects light. And that is what it is like to be the Aurora Collective as part of the sun and the stars, with this crystalline structure bouncing light everywhere. Like, light comes through here and then it gets bounced out through here, and then some of it gets refracted as rainbows and some of it gets reflected off. That is the pure light of consciousness, the pure light of awareness. It is unity consciousness. The individuation of separating it into individuated colors is never mistaken as separation, like here's something that's God, but then here's something that's not God. Like, it is all unity consciousness. It is all that purity ray of self-knowing, of God selfness, even as it is bouncing back and forth and reflecting off of each other in this larger crystalline structure of knowingness. So I'm an impulse of light on a network of light. The light is self-aware, and the light itself is truth, like pure information of higher intelligence, which we would define as God. In this biology, the aperture that we use to perceive that light of truth is this. It's known as your pineal gland or your third eye. So we associate it a lot with this part of the body. However, understand that it's a big, giant world of light, and that's where I come from, and also it's where I bring the information from, that realm, that level of being. That's where I get all of my teachings from, that I see it internally with that structure. I translate it into the things that I can do with these hands, or what I can say with this mouth. Because if I were a rock shrimp here in this world, I would have a different level of neurology and I would see a different color spectrum. You understand, like right now, humans perceive this amount of color. Rock shrimps perceive like an amount of color that's this much. Or if I was a dog, I would translate it into olfactory communication, or similarly, a bee or a butterfly, because they are very much more centered on pheromones and smells. But I'm here in a human form. So I'm like, I'm going to translate it into this color spectrum, into the things I can do with my fingertips, things that are like writing with a pen or painting with a paintbrush or playing on a piano. And of course, I'm playing within the auditory range of what humans can hear. All of this has been my journey over many years of fine-tuning my communication style, because also a big part of this sharing of information of pure light is telepathy and empathy. So I call it telempathy, like telepathy. I'm a telempath because it's information, thought structure from mind to mind, but also feeling. And feeling is down here in my guts and my belly. Feeling is also here in my heart. It's feeling structure also sent to others. And that's a level of pure communication that is beyond what I jokingly call the flapping of my moving mouth parts, which is like we're making all of these words and phonetic sounds with the mouth, but that's not our primary way of communicating. And each one of us, like, you know, I'm a walk-in, so I wasn't here when the body was a baby, but most of you live in your bodies. You lived through infancy. You felt what it was like to be a little baby and come here and not have verbal equipment. Like little babies don't know, we don't come here knowing how to talk or speak or use language to express our self or our desires or our needs in the world. And mostly what we're doing then is spending the first couple of years figuring how to communicate so that you can say things like, I'm thirsty, like I need juice, or like my diaper's full, like I need to do something about this. Like it's usually pressing physical needs. And then, of course, we also want to share our inner world with the rest of the world, to say things like, I think this, I feel this is who I am as a person. And then also to learn who and what other people are too. But we actually have a true mind that is beyond that imposed language structure. And that's the true mind of this pure light of awareness that bounces through reality like on a crystalline form, and that we're on the journey of returning to that level of mental awareness, that each one of us has the potential inside of us to bypass or transcend the implanted talking mind, to go into states of inner stillness and direct perception where you just know beyond words, and to be able to transmit information, to receive knowing like from the sun and the stars beyond words, and then to also be able to take that light from inside of you and send it out to others just beyond knowing, beyond words. And that is where we're moving as a human collective. So I didn't know that so much of my time and mission here would be about being here at this moment of transhumanism. But transhumanism is like humans are doing a lot of things with, where's my cell phone? That humans communicate with one another because they've got the phone. Instead of using this as the phone, they're using this as the phone. There's no judgment here. But the idea is that at a certain point, we transcend the need for this externalized technology. You see it as an externalized form of who and what you really are. Or even right now we're using the computer and the Zoom, that at a certain point, we will not have to use the computer as an intermediary to be able to Zoom with each other. And we will make a real recording, like a real Akashik record, for lack of a better word, an indelible recording of the sharing that we had as consciousnesses together, and then be able to share that with other people who are like, I want to tune into 2:07 p.m. when this guy and this person was over here talking about these information, and I want to hear what they said. And then also, like, you start to recognize like the things that you do throughout the day with your time are indelible artistic expressions through time. And then the whole idea of selling your time for doing something you don't want to do becomes very distasteful. Becomes like, oh, like I don't want that to be indelibly in the time record. Like that's me digging a ditch over there. I did it for $25, but I didn't really want to do it. Or any of the things that you did because you needed to survive. It's just a different level of survival. It's not out of judgment. It's just out of the sense of like, oh, like what a boring thing to have, written into the time record when we could be doing so much more interesting and vibrant things. So I will, to your audience, I'll give good information. There was an earthly teacher, but he's not here anymore, named José Argüelles, and he did a lot of really good work in the sense of getting humans to reassess our connection to time. He worked a lot with the Mayan calendar, and he had a good aphorism. People around here, they say time is money, like, hey, with a big cigar, like, time is money, kid, like, get going, like.
That's right.
But he said time is art. And that's what I really believe. That's what I'm trying to exemplify and show to others. Like right now, we are having an artistic sharing between my mind and my beingness and your mind and your beingness. And I am learning from you and you are learning from me. We are exchanging gifts with one another. And these gifts are also shared tangentially with everyone who listens to and accesses this later at a different time. That all of these thought forms that are coming from higher dimensional intelligence, higher presence, higher light body presence coming through us are radiating outward to all these other lives, touching on all these other lives, being refracted and reflected in new directions. And then they send it out with their minds. It becomes a profound, beautiful art project of the most amazing light show of all of these rainbow impulses bouncing back and forth between one another. And then that becomes so much of a more interesting, magical, supernatural, satisfying, miraculous, uplifting, fantastic way for us to use and perceive our time and being here and being embodied than the industrialized commodification approach, which is, hey kid, I got my cigar, time is money, get out there and make $1. You got to sell your time for money, and that's how you're going to stay alive. So yeah, José Argüelles, great teacher, great thinker. And then I'm also trying to, in my own way, bring that message of the profound value of what it is to be here in time. Like that's what I said, that sometimes just being is a value. Your being self state is important. It's not just about production and what you produce and what you make. Even as an artist or a musician, like I got to make a painting, I got to make a song. I feel those impulses, but sometimes we all just need to focus on, yes, something, I need to perceive. I need to look around. I need to soak in the colors with my eyes. I need to be in presence with other people. Like I need to be a sacred witness to that person. They're on their journey. They're in front of me. They're speaking or sharing or doing something. All of those are also really valued activities for us to be in time doing.
Not agree with you more either on the note of transhumanism. Yeah, we have all these, we've been clustered with all these external devices, and soon these devices, they will, like you said, they will become one way or another internal devices, and we won't need them anymore, and we'll be able to link and operate whatever we were using before, whether it be phones or headphones or calculator or anything like that. It'll have some sort of internal component, and it's a scary thought. And
well, yeah, maybe I see two different pathways. One is the pathway where we have something implanted internally, and then it gives us some kind of augmented beyond our biological capacity power to be a supercomputer or super communicator or any of those things. But another thing, what I really think is more true, is if you just get rid of the stuff that is artificially imposed upon us, I think we have dormant superpowers that come alive. And there's a really good story from Kurt Vonnegut called Harrison Bergeron that also, I think they made it into a movie. It's worth checking out. The main character is named Harrison Bergeron, and he's a super genius, but he lives in this world where everybody has these anti-augmentations to kind of bring down, if you're a genius up here, they're going to implant a bunch of stuff inside of you that like zaps your brain, gives you headaches, makes it difficult to think clearly. You have to wear goggles that make the world fuzzy, maybe like carry around big heavy cinder blocks or some other type of thing that makes it hard to walk. So like one ballerina was so graceful, but she had to do her dance like with heavy cinder blocks tied to her because she, like the other ballerinas weren't as graceful. So it was like this kind of great distortion of the sense of having equality, because everybody has talents and gifts. So this was a way of equalizing everyone out, but also achieving massive conformity. And I see a lot of the things that are going on in our world right now, including these cell phone type of things. I see them as Bergerons. I see them as burdens that are being placed upon our natural gifts that kind of diminish us and make us a bit less than what we could be as vibrant superhumans. And I think that it's been gradually placed upon us, and we've become reliant upon things like the cell phones. But I think that if we're able to remove the architecture, the Wi-Fi, the need for computers, all of these things, and especially the frequency, because a lot of what I teach and what I make artwork about is about the language and the food of frequency. If you can get beyond these things that are artificial frequencies, then the most amazing things happen. The dormant powers wake up, and you realize, wow, you are the miracle. You are the supercomputer. You are able to do all these calculations without having to have a Casio computer implanted into your brain. So I think that's a more positive, like there's all these different timelines. That's one of the most positive timelines where humans and humanity in general realize, oh, wait a minute, it's like the ruby slippers. Like I click my heels together. Like I don't really need these computers and cell phones. I have it all innate inside of myself, and that I've been bending over backwards and contorting myself to do all these things by using external hardware. But that really what we need to do is return to these capacities. And I think that humans had these capacities in ancient times, what would be remembered as mythological times, or ancient Egypt, or a time before history that is often held in a oral tradition as a historical record. But if there's no written record of it, then our current level of society kind of diminishes it. So there's many, many songs from native or aboriginal traditions that are about this type of world, but because that's just a song, it is just a folk tale, it is nonsense. Of course, I'm being facetious. They throw it out the window. It is just folk knowledge. But yeah, it's actually, I think, remembrance of a very real time when humans were really super beings and had superpowers, and we can get back to that.
That's good. That's wonderful. That's good news.
Yeah.
I love to hear that. I see that too. We can be so much more, and I think we can. So that's wonderful. That's beautiful. There are a few more things I wouldn't mind just talking about before we come to a close. I'd love to go back to your art again, because with almost everything, quality is a big factor. It's a big piece. And it seems that the term or the concept made by hand and quality are very hand in hand. And just based on you explaining your methods and your processes of doing these paintings and these art, I could just imagine the quality. And I mean, I can see it with my own eyes, but I mean, to see it and feel it in person, I mean, I could just imagine. Because you also, to go back, you mentioned that you build, I don't remember the term, but the frames that the canvas goes on and everything, and then you whatever process it is, the whiteboard, you kind of do that from scratch and sand it down and everything. That's amazing. That's just so amazing. So you seem to make every piece an experience based on the quality and effort you put into it, but also just you're explaining on how you get your idea, so to speak, of what you're going to put on the canvas, or what you're going to build and what you're going to create. So and that's just, it's just beautiful. It's so great to see someone with such a crazy, not crazy, but amazing and wild method and devotion, and just how you seem to think of way you're mixing of the paints, and you have methods and processes of that, and it just seems like your work is just bursting with quality and uniqueness, but also, I mean, it's just it stands as an experience of all the thoughts and all the effort and power and everything that you put into it. So I don't really know what else to say, but I think it's just amazing. So if there's anything else you want to speak on your art, I would also, after that, just love to hear a little bit about your clothing, how you do it, and some of the clothing that you've made, because I have been to your website and I have seen some of the different clothing that you've made and that's available. And of course, you're wearing something very beautiful that I assume that you made. So yeah, if you could talk about that for a little bit as well.
Thank you so much for that beautiful recognition of my artwork and my artistic journey, because I really do look at each piece as something like I make it all from scratch, and I look at the entirety of everything that I'm doing as part of the artwork. So yes, everything from going to the lumberyard and getting the pieces of plywood and making them into things that I can actually paint upon, to my own learning process, because I'm always in a process of learning and becoming more of an expert and having more knowledge and perception. So the patterns that I do started out relatively simplistic, and just like when you learn words and phrases like your Dick and Jane, see Dick run, see Spot run, those are simple books. Then you move into young adult fiction, then eventually you read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. So the paintings that I do now are more like War and Peace, but I started out with very simple forms and simple ways of putting them together, and then moved into these greater levels of complexity. And so I'm always on a journey of leveling up myself. Everything about this, being an artist, is about, like I do have those values of making things from scratch. And then I also feel like the internalization process of what I'm learning as I'm making it is embedded in the actual painting, that it would not be as profound if it was just like, oh, like I waved my magic wand, I snapped my fingers, poof, like the final piece came out. Like when I do a painting over 6 months or a year, I'm really on a journey. Like if you have ever driven from the East Coast, from New York to San Francisco, something like that, a cross-country journey, you are on an odyssey. You go through changes and transformations. Like as you're driving along, you're thinking about things, you have adventures, you have flat tires, you have to find burritos to eat, you have to do all these different things and find hotels, and then eventually you make it to your destination. Every single one of these paintings feels to me like one of these long cross-country journeys or epic odysseys, where I started here at this level and then went across. And then that moment when you take your paintbrush and put the last dot or the last little amount of paint onto the surface, and that surface is complete, is such a feeling of accomplishment. And it feels to me like then that moment becomes embedded in time. Like, and then there's that moment, kapow, like when you finish a marathon, like you go across the finish line, hooray, like I'm breaking the tape, it's Chariots of Fire, like yes, like I made it. I know it's kind of an old movie, but whatever is your athletic inspiration, yes, you make it across the finish line. And then in that moment of having that sense of completing it, then it's like, wow, you stand back, you look at it, you can be amazed by your own journey. And then I also get super inspired to start the next one, because then I'm always like rolling up my sleeves for immediately diving into the next piece, because I'm like, well, that piece is great, but what happens if I add this? So a lot of my work is like, if I'm working with one color octave, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, but what if I add another octave on top of there? And this painting that's still wrapped up in plastic, that's what happens if I add 6 octaves together. And this painting that I have here, this is 3.5 octaves. So this, I have it in my storage unit right now, but the fabric that I made off of this painting, which is called Supernumerary, that's what I was exploring around 2017 or 2018. So I did a whole series where I had several big panels of that size, and I did different versions or different iterations of what would happen if I did, it's kind of like in a song, like if I did these 3 chords together, what would I get? What would it look like? So I didn't know exactly what I would get. I didn't know exactly what would happen, where the harmonics would overlap, how it would look or sound or feel, basically, to do that. Like I'm on an exploration, even as I have a very clear vision, like I want to make it look like this, but also sometimes when I'm doing it, I'm like, well, it's coming out different than I thought, and it wants to be this instead of what I wanted it to be. So I'm in a divine partnership also with the cosmos, because I'm like, but I want it to be like this, but the cosmos is like, but it's gonna look better if you do this, like let it be its own thing. So then I'm like, well, okay, then I'll do a different version of this over here. Like I do multiple different versions of it, and then I have that to kind of play off of each other, different riffs of the same chord structure. And then, so when I finished that series, I'm like, well, then what would happen if I added up 6 octaves, and what would that look like? And I don't know. So I have like a big giant, a compass, not a protractor, but like a big giant compass that's kind of the length of my arm that I can attach a pencil to. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to measure this all out. And then I'm going to make big giant circles that are this big, these smaller circles, and I'm going to fit it all together. It becomes very athletic. Like I have this big giant thing that I'm kind of like drawing all of these circles upon, and I start to see all of these concentric circles adding up together. And then I hold it up and I stand back. I'm like, look at all these things that are happening. All these interesting interplays and interference patterns are coming up. And then that inspires me. And then there's difference of like, I can make different color choices as an artist, like I can make aesthetic choices. It becomes a hugely invigorating journey to me, that I'm not bored. I'm totally, because some you might look at this and be like, paint on one painting for a year, like, doesn't that make you bored? I'm like, no, believe me, I'm not bored. It's absolutely an unfoldment and an exploration that is constantly a surprise in the most wonderful way. It tickles me. It is the most wonderful way. I'm like, I didn't know that red and green would end up coming next to each other like this. Like, what a wonderful surprise. And then sometimes also imagery comes out as I put these complex forms together. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that I would see that there, or that I would see that there. So these wonderful interweavings happen. And then, so after I complete a project like that, like I completed, supernumerary, I painted it, took a year. And then what I'll do is, because one painting taking a year, like I have to price them rather high, in terms of being able to commodify them and the work that goes into it. So to make it more accessible, more affordable to people, and to put it more in people's everyday space of like, how can you like, I live surrounded by my artwork and I have lots and lots of paintings and it's all in my environment. How can I make it available to others? So I started initially to make scarves or wall hangings that you can put up, but now I have a whole series of clothing. So I take really detailed, high resolution images with the camera. I manipulate it in Photoshop. I put it into fabric design templates. Then I have the fabric put into clothing design templates. So I have all sorts of different things, different ways of making it accessible to people who might not be whatever millionaires to be able to afford an original. So I have different women's clothing and dresses, and also men's, like, hoodies and t-shirts and things. And I also have big wall hangings and scarves, and also smaller things. And also, do I have one available to me? Hold on a second. Let me grab a book.
Absolutely.
Too. Hold on one second, because this is actually perfect. I did this because I initially thought that I was just going to make a series of prints. But if you have a series of prints, then you have the burden of like, then you're going to have to get it framed. Then there's the cost of custom framing. Like, I used to be a custom framer. I know exactly how pricey it is to get everything with a frame and a mat and everything put around it. So I ended up making an art book about all of the imagery that I have, that I use in my classes, and that are these kind of diagrammatical. Here, I'll hold it up even closer so you can see it.
Yeah, oh wow, that's so cool.
And wait, first let me just even show you the outside of the book, because this is from, I don't know if you can see it. Wait, we'll put some light on here like this. It's just so difficult with the glare. So this is actually a painting in the same series as the one that I've got on the wall over there, but this is the one that's finished. It's just hard to see with the light conditions, but you can see all of these amazing different overlapping, interpenetrating. There, maybe that's better.
Yeah, there we go. Oh my God. Yeah, once you see the brighter details,
and the paint is dimensional too. So each line is kind of like, not puffy paint, but like a raised dimensional line, and they all interweave with one another as kind of like spider web. So that I also have, after I did that, then I did fabric that is now, I have like, a nice pair of pants or some, cool shirt that has this fabric painted on it too. So that's the more recent stuff that I did. And then, so I have imagery that's like this, that's not hanging on my wall right now, but you can see there's individuated humans along with time structure. And then this is a close-up of that. And then I'll show you.
Similar to one of your, I don't know if I think it was one of your album covers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll show you the album cover if you want to, because I've got that in here too.
I use
All
that
of
for
the things. Yep.
I use that for the
This is-
picture of our first episode together. Yeah.
I love it. I'm so happy. This painting is called Birth
Oh, I
of the
love that.
Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And
That's
then we have a sculpture that I did in wire of the lasagna that's over there too. So all of this work
cool.
has at its genesis this flying rainbow lasagna shape, but sometimes it comes out in a different way. Like sometimes it's painted literally like those things there, but sometimes it's implied like it is there. And I also included in this book some of these drawings. These are like sketches that I do.
Oh, concept. Oh, wow. That is so cool.
And here's another good one. Like, I don't know if you can see that one there. That one that's right at the center of your screen.
There we go. There we go.
That's a pineal gland. That's a third eye.
Oh,
that
yeah.
has
Okay. Oh my God. That is very interesting. There we go. Because I can see the face now. Wow.
Yes, it's inside of a person's mind.
That's
and there's
so
other minds
cool.
that
is
come
so
together.
Cool. Oh my God, I would love a picture of, if you have, do you know if there's any photos of something like that I can use for the cover photo for the episode?
Absolutely.
That is really cool.
I will send it to you as soon as we complete our mission and we've completed our recording here. I'll send it to you. So I do lots of, like, I have sketchbooks where I do drawings in pencil, and you'll see things like that. And out of the sketchbooks, then I will develop actual big ideas for paintings. Because then if you're going to commit to a painting, it's like, you're going to be painting on this for a year. Like, it's got to be something that you really love and believe in. And then you finish up a painting, and then it's just the impetus to move into the new one. And so, yeah, that was for many years, that was my focus of my output, just doing lots and lots of paintings. And recently I've been doing lots and lots of music also. So it's all language of harmonics. It's all ways of communicating beyond the limitations of the hacked human operating system and just, speaking with words. It's all really, it's my offering or my gift or what I have to share with the world, in the sense of all of these things I find to be truly uplifting and nourishing and positive for me to know about, that I find it to be like, it's not just merely like, oh, like that's passingly interesting. It's like, no, like these things make me feel passionately alive. And I want to give that level of inspiration and encouragement and the breath of, encouragement for you to keep going on your journey. I give all of that hugely like positive stuff, is what energy wise is what I put into my artwork. And same thing with the clothing. Like, I would put these outfits together and I wear like these very, brightly colored, vibrating with pattern type of outfits. I feel like it makes me happier. People always talk to me about it. They're like, nice pants, like, and I'll tell them like, these are maps of time. Like, I will talk with people at Discount Tire and tell them like, yes, let's learn about time by talking about this. It's just ways of going beyond automated or boring or industrialized mindset and putting it into your environment. And then also music is what I do for myself, for my own mind state, but then also I'll play music as like something that I do while I'm making my artwork. All of it is this energy. If you can imagine, like, you're chugging along, going through time, it's positive. It makes you want to keep going. You're on a marathon, but it doesn't have to be a grueling marathon. Like sometimes a marathon, you're like I could barely make it, like, or sometimes in a marathon you could be like, yeah, like chugging along. So yeah, I try to send out this positive Gatorade, giving you good energy so that you can keep going. And also, you're not alone. We're all running this marathon together. And then eventually you really do get someplace on this marathon. You're not just running on a hamster wheel. We really are making a soul migration that has a culmination and a crescendo that has meaning and purpose, and all of the grueling or challenging parts of being in a marathon, it all becomes worth it. And like, again, you get to the finish line, you're like, I made it. Yes, triumph. And it is your individual triumph. It is the triumph of the collective and all of these other organisms that were a part of your journey too. It becomes amazing and profound. And then that's not the end. That is the beginning of the next level of experience that unfolds after that.
That's so cool. I'd love to see, I love turtles. My favorite animal is the turtle. And I would love to see I mean, I wish I could afford like a custom piece, because I would ask you to do your thing, but with have some sort of turtle or a turtle shell in there. I think that would be so cool. Yeah,
I would love that. And I see the turtle that's on your mic stand too. So I see that
yeah,
turtle is very
yeah.
important to you there.
I try to keep them all over the place.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love
And
them.
guess what? Tortoise shell and the patterns that are on their shells are also part of the special patterns of, like divine harmony in the cosmos. Like it's in so
Okay.
many different animals. Yes, it's in so many different plants and animals and natural structures. It's very profound.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to, like, I mean, I'll give you a moment at the end to share your website and links and everything, but
That would
is
be
is there
wonderful.
anything maybe related to what we talked about today, your art, music, clothing, anything else that, or I mean anything that you'd like to share or talk about before we say goodbye? I mean, I
Thank you so
sure
much for
hope that
that.
you, on that note, I sure hope that you'd like to come back, because I still have lots. I've been writing down stuff, and I have lots that I'd still love to talk to you about. So I sure hope you will come back. But as
I
for today,
happily accept. I happily accept your beautiful invitation to return.
I'm so
Yes, thank you. Because I know we only have so many hours in a day.
yeah,
And I do have another, like I'll be, sharing on a video on another thing pretty soon.
wonderful.
So yeah, I love sharing my message. So I'm so happy to come here and share these ideas with you and with anyone who watches this, as a recording with your audience. Yeah, I'm very honored, and thank you for the platform, and thank you for the respect and encouragement, because you're also always so wonderful, as a host, inviting me on. And I
Oh,
know I talk a lot, like I talk whatever so
that
much.
means
So
a wonderful guest, someone who speaks. So thank you
thank
for
you.
coming on, and thank you for everything you share. I love it. So that's why I keep having you back.
Beautiful. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, I think I always like to end on a note of encouragement, because I am, I'm like a very relentlessly positive person, but even I can sometimes feel a bit weary in this world of the different challenges that are going on. And sometimes people might feel isolated or confused about what is happening in our world, what direction are we even going in. So yeah, I've been here for 20 years, and I've been on my mission of sharing uplifting art and music and the concept of Flying Rainbow Lasagna. All of this, like I said, it really does add up to something. What it adds up to is soul freedom, that you've been going, each one of us has been, the collective you, going through levels of metamorphosis, state change. State change is like when water changes into steam. You add energy to water and it changes into steam. When you add energy to the human being that is like a dense material person, you then become more like steam. You become the less dense, light version of you. So all of these challenges, especially over the past 2 years, it's all been birth pains. It's all been the challenge of metamorphosizing or state changing into being a completely different type of being. And when I talk about something like, yeah, like there's this food room and you need magical pieces of paper to get there, and got to pay for your hot water coming out of a hole in the wall. All of those things, those challenges, when you get to this new, when you change state and metamorphosize and go into this different level of being, all of those challenges are reframed. There's a different context. You're in a new paradigm, a new meta context of where do resources come from, and what does your body require, and how do you fulfill those resource requirements. And everything that you have learned in your life of physicality and materiality up into this moment, or that moment of release and freedom, becomes irrelevant, because those are all of the rules and necessities of that time and place. And now you are here in this time and place, different sets of rules apply. So we are returning to states of profound freedom. That's Flying Rainbow Lasagna. When you add an additional dimension, you add an additional degree of freedom. We are moving into these states where you will become profoundly free. So as you're running the marathon, whether you are chugging or whether it's grueling, keep that in mind as the goal. You're going towards freedom, and the freedom state is completely different than anything that most of us has probably experienced here while in embodiment. Yeah, there's huge levels of expansiveness, empowerment, upgrading in quality of existence, upgrading in how much love you're able to feel and reflect outwards to others. And also your journey makes sense. You look back over your shoulder and you're like, not only like, wow, like I ran that far, but you're also like, that's why that happened. That's why that thing happened. Oh, that's why that crapola thing had to happen. And then it all makes sense. So there's also a huge amount of healing internally. Talked about grief and loss. you start to understand like, oh, like that's why my cat had to die. Or that's why I lost that friend who's not on my path anymore. All of a sudden, all of those losses make sense. And there is a sense of culmination of consciousness coming back together. You have a reunion with so many forms of consciousness, like people that you thought you lost, you separated from them, they're not lost, you get to reconnect, amazing things happen. And so, yeah, I just offer that note of encouragement to keep going. We do eventually burst forth into freedom, and it is an amazing culminative moment, a crescendo, like at the end of that Beatles song, da, 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 day in a life, at the end of day, I'm like, da-da! Oh, and then you're done, but you're not done. You're on the next chapter.
That's right. Wonderful. Well, yeah, that's great. Those words go out to everyone listening. Please, yeah, that's so true. And thank you for those words. It means a lot. I appreciate it. Again, I immensely appreciate your time, your energy, your love, and your art, everything you do. So again, thank you so much. I'm gonna have my mother will reach out to maybe in the next week or so, now that things are calming down a bit. But thank you so much. I think my viewers, the last time you came on, I had nothing but wonderful feedback. Everyone loved it, and I think everyone's gonna love this discussion too. It was great. So thank you so much. Be well, and our paths will absolutely cross again. I promise you that.
I'm so gratified. I'm so happy to hear that people appreciated what I did last time too.
Absolutely.
I do want to tell people how they can find me. Is that okay if I?
I'm sorry. Jeez,
shout out to my website.
Take as much time as you want. Where can we find you, Aurora?
Just really fast. So yeah, you can find my website. I'm flyingrainbowlasagne.com, and it's spelled Lasagne at the end. And you can do a keyword search of just Flying Rainbow Lasagna, like on a search engine, and you'll find my YouTube, because I have lots of teaching videos on my YouTube. You'll find my music, like Birth of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, perfect, fantastic. And also, if you go to the shop section of my website, that connects to my Etsy shop, and that's where you'll find different things like my clothing and other fun things, and my book and other fun things like that. And the ongoing fun good stuff right now is I'm doing a 2022 semester of my online class, Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. So I haven't done that for a couple of years. We just started the semester. It's not too late to hop on board. So I invite and encourage people to enroll in that. And then also something new that I'm offering. It's so new, I don't really have it even listed on my website, but yeah, I do one-on-one sessions, and that often it is focused on people who call themselves star seeds or clairvoyants or whatever, but I really leave the door open to anyone that feels that they can benefit from a session or from some personal energy or information that I have to share. So you can contact me and ask me about more details on that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I on another note, before you go, I did notice that you started up a new class, so I did want to congratulate you on that, because that's wonderful. So keep doing everything you're doing, and that's great. So everyone, please check out her stuff. I mean, she has a lot to offer. So whether it's music, clothing, art, what she has to say, what she has to teach, I'm sure she has something wonderful to offer you. So again, thank you so much for coming. Be well, and
thank you.
Please come back again.
I will. Thank you. You make it such a joy. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, Aurora. So you take care and enjoy the rest of your evening, okay?
I will. Thank you so much. I have to go walk my dog too. She was barking in the background, and now I hear her at the door. She's like, we need to go take care of this. So let me go walk my dog. Have a beautiful night. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your walk. Bye-bye.
Thank you.